I was always taught that the way you treat your underlings, if that's even a bad word, your staff, is a reflection on your character. And one day, I was in graduate school. I didn't know much. I mean, I knew my mom. She was 40 years old. She had graduated from University of Pacific. She got another BA at Stanford. She got a Stanford law degree. She was one of the first women to graduate. And then she came home and had 4 children. One passed away, and she was on a little farm. They had very little money. People kind of made fun of her with all this education. She couldn't get a job as a court reporter. But then when she was 40, I think I was in 2nd grade, she was in her early 40s. They opened a state court of appeal, and she was the research attorney. 15 years later, she was second superior court judge in Fresno County. Then she became, I think, either first or second female appellate court judge in California. And then she died tragically from a brain tumor at 66. But my point is, I was driving home from school, and Fresno's on the way to Selma, and I stopped in to see her unexpectedly. And she was a newly appointed appellate court judge, and she had like 6, you have 6 staffers or clerks, and they were all young women. And they were all going out to lunch with her. And anyway, one of the judges came up to me and said, we'd like to take, they were all male judges, the others, they were wonderful people too. They, Democrat, Republican, in those days it didn't matter. They were wonderful old-time jurists. They were very educated, sober. And one of them said, your mom never wants to go out to lunch with us. You got to work on her. And I said, why? She goes, because she takes all of her staffer goes out with her. She's at home with all these young women and I said, well, maybe could they have gotten a job without her? And he said, no, we admit that. But the point she always told me is never speak ill of your staff or your people who work for you. And I did that with farming too. When if I was 105 and there were people, picking plums, I'd always bring out water, or I'd say go home early. It's very important, I think, in a hierarchical society to treat people who work for you with dignity. I know that I have 3 people work directly for me, and I try not to. I never speak behind ill of them. I try to. One of my employees, Megan Ring, was just voted the outstanding Hoover staffer of all of the staff.
Yeah. She's terrific.
She is.
Good for her.
And I always say I wouldn't know where I was. I wouldn't. Megan calls me every morning and says, these are the ones I did not schedule for you. If you object, tell me. These are the ones that I did schedule for you. And I said, Megan, you know more about them than I do. And I think it's really important that you can judge somebody. When you see this woman, Porter, and she's doing that one video and that staffer just happens to come in the back, things like that happen all the time. And then she starts to use the F word about her own staffer and starts screaming at her, and with this grimace on her face, and then she just corrects back to a happy face when she gets back on the camera. And then that reporter, the way she treated her, I'm not the journalist, but it was just, it was so condescending, and she's just an obnoxious person. And the idea that she's now got a 40% lead, she's leading of all the candidates in this open primary or open race for governor, she's got 40%. I cannot understand it. It doesn't make any sense. I don't think she can win after that. I really don't. I think a lot of California people feel that why would you want a governor who treats people around her like that and would treat the people like that? And then somebody's going to say, you idiot, Victor, look at Gavin Newsom. He cheated on his best friend's wife when he was in city government, and he can't finish a sentence without a pornographic word. He said he's going to punch people in the mouth that oppose him. He's going to hit Trump in the mouth. He doesn't seem to be worried about the Palisades disaster that's not being rebuilt. He didn't seem to be, he blows up dams rather than builds them. So what do you expect? And so it's very important to treat people that work for you or work and I don't mean necessarily even underneath you, but with you, not to treat them that way. It's horrible
to see something like that. Yeah.
I worked when I was in high school. I worked for a lot of farms, packers, 3 or 4 different ones, and packing sheds. I did all kinds of jobs, and I met people who treated you fairly and people who treated you, and it's imprinted on you. When I was a graduate student, you were supposed to be TAs, not in charge of the whole class. And I was only 21, and I was assigned my second year when I was 22 to teach an intensive Greek language class. And I won't mention the professor's name. I think I won't even mention the gender because that person is still around. But I was supposed to teach 2 classes a week, and they were supposed to teach 3. I was supposed to do all the homework. Well, I wasn't supposed to, but she assigned me that. And then at one point, the person had a medical issue and said, I'm not going to be here for 4 weeks, and we want you to teach every day, 5 days a week. I said, okay. But I was, taking my comprehensive exams in languages. I think it was 3 weeks, excuse me. So I said, I will do that. And then, but to do that and prepare at 22 to teach, 20 Stanford students that are your age, basically. Some of them were 20 or 21. And then to correct, 30 pages of composition in Greek is hard. So I was doing that and doing it and doing it. And then she would check in on me. I was supposed to report the end of the day. Well, I fell asleep at 8 o'clock at night once, and I forgot that I didn't check in and say, these are all the homework is done. I will be there at 8 to hand it back. This is what I covered in class. This is what I will. I hope that's okay with you. And then they were supposed to, I'm using they pronouns, they were supposed to sign off. But when I woke up, I didn't look at the clock, and it was 10:20 p.m. And I called that number, and I said, Professor, and that they interrupted me and said, what are you doing? You never, ever call me. You understand that? I said, I'm sorry. I didn't realize. I'm sorry. Did you call me after this hour? You never do that. Never. And so I said to myself, I'm very sorry. I'm mistaken. So then the next day, he came very happy, smiley. How's everything going? I just never was the same. I just did the work. And then I had another professor at Stanford, and I was supposed to teach a Roman history class, and he had family issues. So I was supposed to, basically he said this to me: I don't believe that a second-year graduate student like you would be qualified to teach any of my classes. And it was in ancient history. I won't say Rome or Greek because he's still around. And I don't think you're qualified. So I want you to sit in the back and not say a word and just listen to me. And if I ever miss a class, then you'll know something. And so I said, do I get credit for this or not?
Yeah, it's kind of a burden there.
Yeah. He said, no, this will, because you were required to do this 3 times, teach 3 classes, TA, as part of your stipend, your scholarship. And so I went to the chairman. I said, he doesn't want me in there, and he doesn't like me, and I haven't said a word. I don't know him, but he wants me to sit there and watch. And then he wants me to correct all of his, there were like 50 people, all of his exams. He doesn't want to correct them. And he said, that's what you're going to do. So I did them first week, second week, third week. They were every 2 weeks they had to write a paper. And then he would write, I thought they were very good. So I was writing comments, and he said, I don't need you anymore at all because you don't know how to grade. You don't know how to do anything. I wrote all his comments. And so I think you should just leave. And he didn't say leave. He said, I think you should just stop grading, which I was relieved, and sit back and learn something. So I sat back because I was going to get credit for it. And then he had a family issue come up. I won't say which because it'll identify him if I do. And he was going to be gone for 4 weeks, just like the other professor. She 3 weeks, him 4 weeks. So he calls me at night. And he called me about 10 o'clock. And he said, you're going to have to come in tomorrow. It was 3 days a week. And you're going to have to teach Roman. I had no preparation at all. And so I got all excited. I stayed up all night. It was on Hannibal and the Battle of Cannae. So I got the class and I got them all. I got out, everybody stood up and I said, you guys are the Carthaginians and you are the Romans. And we're going to have a double encirclement. And then I had them kind of like Game of Thrones when you had the Battle of the Bastards. Well, everybody went forward and then we circled them. And then I said, stop. And then I went through the mechanics of Roman warfare and they kind of liked it. And then I did this all during, and I got all the way to the younger Gracchi, and then I got into Marius and Sulla, and then this person came back. And the students, I sat in the back, and when somebody raised his hand and said, thank you for having blank Mr. Hanson. We really loved it. We got to, and they were basically saying, you were the most boring lecturer in the world. And I'm not kidding you. He called me in and said, you're done. Out.
Yeah. Wow.
Don't ever pull that again. And so I went to the chairman again. And I said, now he's fired me. And you know what he said? Good. You don't have to do it anymore. You get credit. And I said, are you worried that he just fired me for no reason? I was a graduate, so I didn't know anything. And that was the point I'm making. When I was there, they treated their people really badly. These professors did, like idiots. And there were a few exceptions. There's a wonderful guy named Mark Edwards. I had another advisor, and he said, I came home from Greece. I had a torn ureter in Athens, another medical disaster. I almost died. I had a 9mm staghorn calculus. I was in Corinth excavating. It tore completely through the ureter and leaked urine. I went to the Evangelismos Hospital, which is kind of like Dante's Inferno. And then I found a private, and I was in bed for 8 weeks, and the doctor said to me, if you don't get home in 24 hours, you're going to lose your kidney and worse. So I had a wonderful professor who was there, Mary Kay Gamble, and she was my undergraduate, and she was visiting the American school, and she said, I will go back to San Francisco and escort you. And she flew all the way back. My dad met me at the airport. He thought he was on his 41st bombing mission again. He had the car, the station wagon with a bed made it. He said, we're going to get to Fresno. I had a really high temperature. You're going to be operated at 6 a.m. We got the surgeon ready. I said, well, what time? It says it's almost 3:45. And I said, Dad, it's 200 miles. He said, it's not going to Kyoto or it's not going to Kobe. We can make it.
Yeah.
He just drove like 90 miles an hour. Just criticizing people who drove. But I got there. Right. I checked in. They repaired it. And the point I'm making is when I got all done with that, this person said, I want you to participate in this excavation, Stanford, and I want you to fly to Germany, and I want you to pick up a Volkswagen bus at the factory, or I think it was in Munich maybe, and then I want you to drive it all the way to Greece and pick up the students at the airport. And it was so complicated. You know, I was like 23, and so I was home. So all I said was, I just got home 2 days ago out of the hospital, and I was in Greece. He thought I was still in Greece, maybe. I don't know. He left a message with my parents. I didn't really talk to him. He left the message, so I called him back, and he said, where are you? I couldn't find you. You weren't there. I said, I'm in California. Why are you in California? You were supposed to be in Greece. I said, for what? You didn't tell me anything. I'm at the American School of Classical Studies. It's over with, and I came home. Well, here's what you're going to do. You're going to fly to Germany, and you're going to do that. And I said, the doctors, I got a shunt in my kidney, and I've been in the hospital 2 weeks. I weigh 130 pounds. I was in the hospital in Greece for 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. I can't quite remember. My dad goes, who in the hell is that? Excuse the language. I said, that's this very important classicist. He said, you're not going anywhere. So I said, I can't go. And he hung up. He didn't say anything. So then when I went back in the fall, I said I had a project, my thesis, and this person was one of the readers. And he said, you will take the thesis, you will put it in my box, and you will get it each chapter. And I said, what do you mean? He said, there will be no discussion. You will put the thesis, one chapter, in the box, and you will pick up the chapter in the box a month later. And you will do this for all of your chapters. And I did not discuss one thing on that thesis, not one. You should do this, you should do that. And then
It's payback.
It's payback. And he said,
Wow.
And then I couldn't get a job. Not that I would have got it. I was a white male. So finally, this guy said, just tell somebody you're working for a big ag corporation, you know. So I did. Kind of did. In those days, you were not allowed to look at your record. So I said, I don't know what it was, West Side Farms Incorporated or something. So the guy called me up and said, Victor, I don't know what the heck this thing is. But I knew the guy. So he said, I'm going to send it in the mail. So it came. And you wouldn't believe what the guy wrote. Very, very adept at languages, but impossible, disruptive and all that stuff. And
Really?
That was a kiss of death. And then I went for a job and a guy took me over and he said, with all due respect, I don't think you should think you're going to get a job with this letter. And I couldn't figure out why it was just so bad. It wasn't so bad. It was just nothing good in it. You know what I mean?